Marcus Chen stepped carefully through the twisted wreckage of what had once been a sleek alien vessel. The crash site stretched across nearly half a kilometer of the forest clearing on Kepler 442b, metal fragments scattered like deadly confetti among the native purple-leafed trees. Steam still rose from several sections of the hull, and the acrid smell of burned synthetic materials filled the air. As the lead xenobiologist for the human colony ship Endeavour, Marcus had seen his share of alien technology, but this craft was unlike anything in the databases. The hull seemed to shift colors in the dim light of the planet's twin suns, and strange symbols pulsed weakly along what remained of the control surfaces. His portable scanner chirped constantly, detecting energy signatures that shouldn't exist according to human understanding of physics. The distress beacon had been broadcasting for 3 days before the colony's long-range sensors picked it up. Standard protocol demanded a full military escort for first contact situations, but the signal was weakening rapidly, and command had decided that time was more critical than caution. Marcus volunteered immediately, his curiosity overriding any sense of personal safety. He rounded a particularly large piece of debris and froze. There, partially hidden beneath a collapsed section of the ship's interior, lay an alien figure. At first glance, Marcus thought it might be dead. The creature was tall, easily 7 feet in length, with a lean, predatory build that spoke of evolution on a world where only the swift survived. Its skin was a deep blue-black that seemed to absorb light, and intricate silver markings covered its arms and face in patterns that reminded Marcus of both circuitry and tribal tattoos. What caught his attention most were the creature's eyes. Even unconscious, they seemed to glow with an inner light, a pale amber that contrasted sharply with its dark features. But it was the labored rise and fall of its chest that told Marcus this being was very much alive, though clearly in distress. The alien's clothing, if it could be called that, appeared to be some form of biomechanical suit that had been severely damaged in the crash. Sections of it sparked weakly, and a greenish fluid that might have been blood seeped from several tears in the material. Most concerning was the creature's obvious malnourishment. Even through the alien physiology, Marcus could see the sharp angles of bones pressing against skin, the sunken quality around the eyes that spoke of prolonged starvation. Marcus activated his comm unit. The colony ship was in orbit, but the message would take several minutes to reach them, and several more for a response. He was on his own for now. Every instinct told him to maintain a safe distance, to wait for backup, to follow protocol. This creature was clearly a predator, built for hunting and killing, and he had no idea of its intentions or capabilities. But as he watched the alien's shallow breathing, saw the way its body trembled with weakness, Marcus felt something that went deeper than scientific curiosity or colonial protocol. It was the same feeling that had driven humans to domesticate wolves, to care for injured birds, to risk their lives saving complete strangers. Compassion wasn't always logical, but it was fundamentally human. He approached slowly, speaking in soft, measured tones despite knowing the creature couldn't understand him. The universal translator in his suit was designed for known languages, useless in a first contact situation. But tone and body language were often universal, and Marcus had learned that calm confidence could cross species barriers. The alien stirred as he drew near, those amber eyes snapping open with an alertness that belied its weakened state. For a moment, Marcus felt like prey being evaluated by an apex predator. The creature's lips pulled back slightly, revealing teeth that were definitely designed for tearing flesh. A low sound, somewhere between a growl and a hiss, emerged from its throat. Marcus stopped moving but didn't back away. Instead, he slowly reached into his pack and pulled out an emergency ration bar. It probably wouldn't be compatible with alien physiology, but it was better than nothing. He unwrapped it carefully, making sure his movements were visible and non-threatening, then placed it on the ground halfway between them. The alien's eyes fixed on the food with an intensity that was almost painful to witness. Its nostrils flared, and Marcus could see its throat work as it swallowed. But it made no move toward the offering, instead watching Marcus with those unsettling amber eyes. Minutes passed in tense silence. The alien was clearly weighing its options, trying to determine if this strange, pale creature represented a threat or an opportunity. Marcus remained perfectly still, understanding instinctively that sudden movements could turn this encounter deadly. Despite its weakened state, he had no doubt the alien could kill him if it chose to. Finally, with movements that spoke of both desperation and pride, the alien dragged itself toward the ration bar. Its legs didn't seem to be working properly, and the effort left it breathing heavily. When it reached the food, it sniffed it cautiously before taking a small experimental bite. The reaction was immediate. The alien's eyes widened, and it quickly consumed the rest of the bar with a hunger that was heartbreaking to witness. When it was finished, it looked up at Marcus with an expression that transcended species barriers. There was still wariness there, still the calculating gaze of a predator, but underneath it was something else. Recognition, perhaps, or the first tentative stirring of gratitude. Marcus slowly reached for another ration bar, and this time the alien didn't growl. The real question was what would happen next. The creature was clearly intelligent, clearly dangerous, and completely alien to anything in human experience. But as Marcus watched it struggle to maintain consciousness, saw the way it fought against its own weakness with a pride that was both admirable and tragic, he knew he couldn't simply walk away. He activated his comm unit again, requesting medical supplies and a transport capable of handling an unknown alien physiology. The response would be immediate and probably negative. Command wouldn't authorize risking human lives for an unknown alien, especially one that looked like it could tear a person apart. But Marcus had already made his decision. Whatever this creature was, wherever it had come from, it needed help. And helping those in need, regardless of the cost or consequences, was perhaps the most human trait of all. The response from the colony ship came exactly as Marcus had predicted. Commander Hayes' voice crackled through the comm with barely contained frustration and concern. Medical evacuation was denied. The risk to human personnel was deemed too great for an unknown alien entity, particularly one that appeared to be a natural predator. Marcus was ordered to observe from a safe distance and wait for the xenobiology team with proper containment equipment. Marcus looked at the alien, who had managed to prop itself against a piece of debris, and was watching him with those intense amber eyes. The creature's breathing had stabilized somewhat after the food, but it was still clearly in critical condition. The greenish fluid that served as its blood had begun to clot, but infection was a real concern, especially on a planet where the bacterial life might be completely incompatible with its physiology. He made a decision that would probably end his career and possibly his life. Marcus switched off his comm unit. Over the next hour, he worked carefully to clear debris from around the alien, speaking in soothing tones and moving with deliberate slowness. The creature watched his every movement but didn't interfere, seeming to understand that Marcus was trying to help. When Marcus accidentally cut his hand on a sharp piece of metal, the alien's nostrils flared and its eyes tracked the scent of human blood with unmistakable hunger. For a terrifying moment, Marcus wondered if he had made a fatal mistake. The creature's pupils dilated, and he could see its muscles tense despite its weakened state. But then, remarkably, the alien turned its head away, as if deliberately choosing not to acknowledge the temptation. It was a gesture that spoke of intelligence, self-control, and perhaps even honor. Marcus quickly bandaged his hand and continued working. He managed to fashion a crude shelter from pieces of the ship's hull, providing some protection from the elements. The alien observed his efforts with what might have been curiosity, occasionally making soft clicking sounds that could have been communication attempts or simply expressions of discomfort. As the day progressed, Marcus shared more of his emergency rations with the creature. Each time, the alien accepted the food with the same careful dignity, never grabbing or showing the desperation that must have been clawing at its insides. It was clearly a being accustomed to hardship, one that had learned to maintain composure even in extremis. When night fell on Kepler 442b, the temperature dropped dramatically. Marcus activated the thermal generator in his pack, creating a warm zone around their makeshift camp. The alien, who had been shivering despite its apparent attempts to hide the discomfort, gradually moved closer to the heat source. By midnight, they were sitting less than 3 feet apart, the alien's amber eyes reflecting the soft glow of the generator. It was then that the creature attempted to communicate. It placed one long-fingered hand over its chest and made a series of sounds that were clearly deliberate. The rhythm and intonation suggested language, though unlike anything in human experience. When Marcus didn't respond, the alien tried again, this time pointing to itself and then to Marcus, as if attempting to establish some form of dialogue. Marcus tried to respond in kind, placing his hand on his chest and saying his name slowly and clearly. The alien listened intently, its head tilted at an angle that reminded Marcus of a bird studying something particularly interesting. After several attempts, the creature managed a rough approximation of Marcus, though the pronunciation was colored by vocalizations no human throat could make. Encouraged, Marcus pointed to the alien and raised his eyebrows questioningly. The response came as a series of flowing syllables that sounded like music mixed with the hunting calls of some great cat. Marcus tried to repeat it and failed miserably, drawing what he could have sworn was amusement from the creature's expression. Eventually, they settled on a simplified version that Marcus could manage. Zara. The breakthrough in communication, however rudimentary, changed the dynamic between them completely. Zara began to show Marcus her injuries, pointing to the worst of them and making gestures that seemed to indicate pain levels. Marcus broke out his basic medical kit, knowing it was designed for human physiology but hoping some of the principles might translate. The antiseptic spray made Zara hiss and bare her teeth, but she held still while Marcus cleaned her wounds. Her pain tolerance was extraordinary, far beyond anything a human could endure without unconsciousness. When he attempted to bandage a particularly bad cut on her arm, Zara gently took the supplies from him and demonstrated her own technique, wrapping the injury with practiced efficiency that spoke of a life lived dangerously. As Marcus watched her work, he began to piece together clues about her background. The way she held herself despite her injuries suggested military or hunter training. Her equipment, what remained of it, was clearly high-tech and purpose-built for combat or tracking. Most telling were the scars that covered her body, old wounds that spoke of countless battles survived. This was no ordinary alien he had stumbled upon, but a warrior of some kind, someone important enough to possess advanced technology and skilled enough to have survived whatever had brought her to this remote world. But it was the way she carefully rationed her movements, conserving energy like someone accustomed to long hunts with uncertain food supplies, that made Marcus realize just how dire her situation had been before he found her. Zara hadn't just crashed on this planet. She had been stranded here, slowly starving while trying to repair her ship or call for rescue. The crash had been the final blow to someone already pushed to the edge of survival. As the night deepened and the strange constellations of Kepler 442b wheeled overhead, Marcus found himself studying his unlikely companion. Zara had fallen into what appeared to be a meditative state, her breathing slow and controlled, her eyes half closed but still alert to any changes in their environment. She was, he realized, beautiful in an utterly alien way. There was an elegance to her movements, a grace that spoke of perfect adaptation to her role as a hunter, but also something else. Intelligence, certainly, but also a depth of character that transcended species. When Marcus dozed off near dawn, exhausted by the stress and adrenaline of the day, he was only dimly aware of Zara moving closer. He woke hours later to find that she had positioned herself between him and the most likely approaches to their camp, her hand resting on a piece of sharp metal that could serve as a weapon. Despite her weakened condition, despite being completely dependent on his help, she had spent the night protecting him. It was a gesture that said everything about the kind of being Zara truly was. The sound of approaching aircraft woke Marcus from his uneasy sleep. 3 military transports circled overhead like mechanical vultures, their engines creating a thunderous roar that sent the local wildlife fleeing into the deeper forest. Zara was instantly alert, her amber eyes tracking the aircraft with the focused intensity of a predator evaluating threats. Her hand tightened on the makeshift weapon she had fashioned, and Marcus could see the subtle shift in her posture as she prepared for conflict. Marcus quickly activated his comm unit, knowing he was about to face the consequences of his unauthorized actions. Commander Hayes' voice came through immediately, tight with barely controlled anger and concern. "Dr. Chen, you will step away from the alien immediately. Our scans show it to be armed and potentially hostile. Evacuation transport is standing by." Marcus looked at Zara, who was watching him with those intelligent amber eyes. She couldn't understand the words, but the tone was universal enough. She knew that the approaching humans saw her as a threat, and her body language suggested she was prepared to defend herself and Marcus if necessary. The irony wasn't lost on him that the starving alien was ready to protect the human who had helped her. "Negative, Command," Marcus said into his comm, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. "The alien, her name is Zara, is injured and weak. She's shown no hostile intent. In fact, she's been protecting me." The silence that followed stretched for long seconds. Marcus could imagine the heated discussion taking place aboard the command transport. When Hayes spoke again, his voice carried the weight of final authority. "Dr. Chen, you are relieved of duty and ordered to return to the ship immediately for psychological evaluation. The alien will be contained for study." The word contained hung in the air like a threat. Marcus knew what that meant in practical terms. Zara would be sedated, imprisoned in a research facility, studied like a laboratory animal. She would go from a proud warrior to a specimen in a cage. The thought made his stomach turn. Zara seemed to sense the shift in the situation. She struggled to her feet, swaying slightly but managing to stand. Even weakened by starvation and injury, she was an imposing figure, all predatory grace and barely contained power. She spoke to Marcus in her musical language, the tone clearly questioning. When he didn't answer immediately, she repeated herself, this time placing a hand on his shoulder. The gesture was surprisingly gentle for a creature with such obvious capacity for violence. Her touch was careful, controlled, designed not to harm despite the sharp claws that tipped her fingers. Marcus realized that in the day and night they had spent together, Zara had never once used her natural weapons against him, even when she was at her most vulnerable and desperate. He made another decision that would change both their lives forever. "I'm sorry, Zara," he said, knowing she couldn't understand the words but hoping she would understand the regret in his tone. "But I won't let them cage you." Marcus activated his emergency beacon but not to call for rescue. Instead, he triggered the distress signal that would indicate hostile alien contact, imminent threat to human personnel, and the need for immediate evacuation of the area. It was a lie that could cost lives if other teams responded, but it might buy them the time they needed. The effect was immediate. The circling transports pulled back to what they considered a safe distance, and Marcus could hear urgent communications chatter as the military reassessed the threat level. He had perhaps 10 minutes before they realized the deception and moved in with whatever force they deemed necessary. Marcus quickly gathered his equipment and the remaining emergency supplies. Zara watched his actions with growing understanding, her amber eyes reflecting what might have been gratitude mixed with something deeper. When he gestured toward the forest, she nodded once and began moving with surprising speed despite her injuries. They had to cover ground quickly, but Zara's condition limited their pace. Marcus found himself supporting her weight as they navigated through the dense undergrowth, her arm around his shoulders and his around her waist. The contact should have been terrifying, given that she could easily kill him with those claws, but instead, Marcus felt an odd sense of rightness about the situation. Behind them, he could hear the sounds of the military team beginning their sweep. They were following protocol, advancing in formation with heavy weapons at the ready, treating the forest as a combat zone. The irony was bitter. Humans prided themselves on being explorers, seekers of knowledge, but when faced with something truly alien, their first instinct was always to control or destroy. Zara led them deeper into the forest, moving with an intuitive understanding of terrain and cover that spoke of her hunting background. Even injured and exhausted, she was better at wilderness navigation than Marcus with all his technology. She chose paths that would mask their heat signatures from aerial scans, led them through streams that would break their scent trail, and found shelter in places that wouldn't show up on standard detection equipment. As they paused to rest in a cave hidden behind a curtain of vines, Marcus began to understand that Zara wasn't just running from the humans. She was hunting them, using every skill she possessed to stay ahead of their pursuit. The predator instincts that made her so dangerous also made her the perfect person to evade capture. In the dim light of the cave, Zara attempted to communicate more complex ideas. She drew patterns in the dirt with her clawed finger, pointing to the sky and making gestures that seemed to indicate vast distances. Marcus began to understand that she was trying to tell him about her people, about where she came from and why she was here. The pictures she drew suggested a hunting culture, beings who traveled between stars in pursuit of worthy prey. But there was more to it than simple predation. Her gestures indicated honor, ritual, codes of conduct that governed the hunt. She wasn't a mindless killer, but a warrior bound by traditions older than human civilization. When she pointed to herself, and then made a gesture that clearly indicated failure or shame, Marcus began to understand why she had been alone on this planet. Something had gone wrong during her hunt. She had been stranded, separated from her people, and had been slowly dying when he found her. The sound of approaching searchers interrupted their communication. Marcus could hear voices in the distance, the mechanical whir of scanning equipment, the heavy footsteps of soldiers in combat gear. They would have to move again soon, but Zara's condition was worsening. The brief rest had allowed exhaustion to catch up with her, and Marcus could see that she was running on willpower alone. He made another decision that surprised them both. Instead of preparing to run, Marcus began to remove his jacket. Zara's eyes widened as she understood his intention. He was preparing to stay behind to surrender himself while she escaped. It was illogical from a survival standpoint, but it was profoundly human. The willingness to sacrifice for someone you cared about, even someone you had known for barely a day. Zara's response was swift and decisive. She grabbed his arm with surprising strength and shook her head firmly. Her amber eyes blazed with an intensity that was part anger, part gratitude, and part something else entirely. She spoke rapidly in her musical language, the tone making her meaning clear even without translation. She would not abandon him any more than he would abandon her. In that moment, Marcus understood that they had crossed some invisible line. They were no longer human and alien thrown together by circumstance. They were something new, something that transcended species boundaries. They were partners, bound together by mutual respect and shared danger, each willing to risk everything for the other's safety. The hunt for them would continue, but they would face it together. 3 days of constant movement through the alien wilderness had pushed both Marcus and Zara to their limits. They moved only at night, hiding during the day in whatever shelter they could find. The military search teams were thorough and well-equipped, but Zara's knowledge of hunting and evasion kept them always one step ahead. Marcus had learned to read the subtle signs that indicated human presence. The way certain birds fell silent when aircraft approached, the faint chemical taste in the air from military rations, the almost imperceptible vibrations in the ground from heavy equipment. Zara had taught him these things without words, guiding his attention with gentle touches and patient repetition, until he began to develop instincts he never knew he possessed. In return, Marcus shared his knowledge of human technology and tactics. He showed Zara how thermal imaging worked, explaining why they needed to mask their heat signatures. He demonstrated the capabilities and limitations of the tracking equipment the search teams were using, helping her understand which countermeasures would be most effective. Their communication had evolved far beyond the basic exchanges of their first meeting. They had developed a complex system of gestures, drawings, and shared experiences that allowed them to convey surprisingly sophisticated ideas. Marcus found himself understanding not just what Zara was trying to communicate, but the subtle nuances of meaning that accompanied her words. It was during their 4th night together that Zara finally shared the full story of how she had come to be stranded on Kepler 442b using a combination of pictures drawn in the dirt and elaborate pantomime. She explained that she was a member of an elite hunting caste known as the Kylith. Her people were ancient, proud, and bound by codes of honor that governed every aspect of their lives. The hunt that had brought her to this world was meant to be her final trial, the test that would elevate her to the highest ranks of her society. She had been tracking a creature of legendary cunning and danger, something that had escaped other hunters for generations. The pursuit had taken her across multiple star systems, following faint traces and ancient legends. But something had gone wrong during the final confrontation. Her prey had been more dangerous than anticipated, and in the battle that followed, both her ship and her quarry had been destroyed. She had managed to reach Kepler 442b in an escape pod, but the crash had damaged her emergency beacon and left her stranded with minimal supplies. For weeks, she had survived by hunting the local wildlife and attempting to repair her communications equipment, but the alien ecosystem was proving more challenging than expected. The local animals were either too small to provide adequate nutrition or too dangerous to hunt in her weakened condition. She had been slowly starving when Marcus found her, her proud warrior's body consuming itself to stay alive. What struck Marcus most about her story wasn't the danger or the hardship, but the shame she felt at her failure. Zara saw herself as having dishonored her people and her traditions. She had failed to complete the hunt, failed to prove herself worthy of advancement, and worst of all, She had been reduced to accepting help from what her people would consider a primitive alien species. Marcus tried to explain that there was no shame in accepting help when it was offered freely, that cooperation and mutual aid were fundamental human values. But he could see that Zara's cultural conditioning ran deep. Her people measured worth through individual achievement and self-reliance. The idea that strength could come from working together was foreign to her worldview. It was then that their philosophical differences led to their first real argument. Marcus insisted that they should try to contact the human colony ship, that there might be a way to negotiate safe passage for Zara in exchange for cultural and technological exchange. Zara was equally insistent that she could not be seen as a captive or a refugee. Her honor demanded that she either complete her original mission or find an honorable death trying. The argument raged through most of the night, conducted in their mixture of words, gestures, and drawings. At one point, Zara actually walked away, disappearing into the forest with such skill that Marcus couldn't track her movement. For terrifying hours, he thought she was gone forever, that their partnership had been broken by cultural differences too fundamental to bridge. But she returned at dawn, carrying fresh water and edible fruits she had foraged during her absence. Her expression was thoughtful rather than angry, and Marcus realized that she had used the time alone to reconsider their situation. When she began to speak, her tone was different, more contemplative. Through their established communication methods, Zara explained that she had been thinking about human behavior as she had observed it. The way Marcus had risked everything to help a complete alien, the way he continued to put her safety above his own interests, the way he shared his resources without expecting anything in return. These actions didn't fit her people's understanding of how intelligent species behaved. Among the Kyleth, strength was individual and competition was the driving force of advancement. Cooperation was limited to family groups or temporary alliances for specific goals. The idea that an entire species could be built around mutual aid and collective effort was revolutionary to her way of thinking. Marcus seized the opportunity to explain more about human society and values. He told her about their history, their struggles, their achievements. He described how humans had learned to overcome their individual limitations through cooperation, how they had reached the stars not because they were the strongest or fastest or most dangerous species, but because they had learned to work together. The conversation continued through the day as they sheltered in an abandoned burrow that Zara had found. Marcus told her about human art, science, philosophy, and culture. He explained the concept of love, both romantic and familial, and how it drove humans to perform seemingly irrational acts of heroism and sacrifice. He described their ability to form bonds with other species, their tendency to adopt and protect creatures that others might see as useless or inferior. Zara listened to all of this with growing fascination. She asked probing questions about human motivations, trying to understand how such an approach to life could lead to successful expansion across the galaxy. Her warrior's mind was clearly working through the tactical implications of a species that fought not as individuals, but as a coordinated whole. As evening approached and they prepared to move again, Zara made a decision that would change the course of their relationship forever. She formally asked Marcus to teach her how to be human. Not physically, of course, but philosophically and culturally. She wanted to understand this strange approach to existence that seemed to make humans stronger rather than weaker. It was a request that spoke to the deepest desires of both their species. For Marcus, it represented the ultimate first contact scenario, the chance to bridge the gap between two completely different forms of consciousness. For Zara, it was perhaps the first step toward a new kind of honor, one based not on individual achievement, but on mutual growth and understanding. Their partnership was evolving into something unprecedented in the history of either species. They were no longer just helping each other survive. They were learning to see the universe through each other's eyes. The breakthrough came on their 7th day together, when Marcus accidentally triggered a trap left by the search teams. A concealed sensor had detected their movement, and within minutes they could hear aircraft approaching their location. Zara immediately began implementing evasion protocols, but Marcus was slowing her down. His human endurance couldn't match her alien physiology, even weakened as she was from starvation and injury. For a moment, the old Zara would have left him behind. Individual survival was paramount in Kyleth culture, and attachment to slower pack members was seen as a weakness that could doom the entire group. But the lessons in human cooperation had taken root deeper than either of them realized. Instead of abandoning Marcus, Zara made a decision that went against everything she had been taught. She chose to stand and fight, using their pursuer's approach to teach Marcus the most fundamental human lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from refusing to run. Zara positioned them in a defensible location and began to set traps using her hunting knowledge combined with human technology from Marcus's equipment. She showed him how to use the terrain to their advantage, how to create false trails, how to turn the hunters into the hunted. But more importantly, she began to understand the human concept of making a stand for principle rather than mere survival. Marcus, meanwhile, was experiencing his own revelation. Watching Zara work, seeing the deadly efficiency with which she could turn an ordinary forest clearing into a tactical nightmare for their pursuers, he began to understand what humanity had been missing in their approach to the galaxy. They had focused so much on cooperation and mutual aid that they had forgotten the importance of individual excellence and the warrior's pride that could drive someone to achieve the impossible. When the first search team entered their kill zone, Marcus and Zara were ready. They didn't attack to kill, but rather to disable and demoralize. Zara's traps neutralized the team's equipment, while Marcus used his knowledge of human psychology to create confusion and fear. Their coordination was perfect, each anticipating the other's moves without need for communication. The team retreated in disorder, reporting that they had encountered sophisticated alien technology and coordinated resistance. Commander Hayes, monitoring the situation from orbit, was forced to acknowledge that they were no longer dealing with a simple rescue scenario. The alien wasn't just intelligent, it was actively working with Dr. Chen in a partnership that defied everything they thought they knew about first contact situations. The second attack came at dawn, with 3 teams approaching from different directions in a coordinated assault. Marcus and Zara had anticipated this escalation and prepared accordingly. They had spent the night creating an elaborate network of misdirection and false positions, turning the forest itself into their ally. But it was during this battle that something unexpected happened. One of the human soldiers, separated from his unit by Zara's tactics, stumbled into a natural hazard that Marcus and Zara hadn't anticipated. A section of unstable ground gave way, trapping the man in a crevice with rising water from an underground stream. He would drown within minutes unless someone helped him. Marcus moved to assist immediately, his human instincts overriding tactical considerations. But it was Zara's response that truly demonstrated how much she had learned about humanity. Without hesitation, she followed Marcus into danger, using her superior strength and agility to help extract the trapped soldier. Together, they pulled him to safety and provided basic medical care before withdrawing to their secondary position. The rescued soldier, Sergeant Rodriguez, would later report that the alien had shown not only intelligence and tactical skill, but genuine concern for human life. She had risked her own safety to save someone who had been actively hunting her, displaying a level of compassion that challenged every assumption the military had made about alien motivations. Word of the rescue spread quickly through the search teams and eventually reached Commander Hayes. For the first time since the situation began, doubt crept into the official narrative. If the alien was truly hostile, why would it risk exposure to save a human life? If Dr. Chen was under some form of alien control, how could he have acted with such clear moral purpose? The questions became even more complex when Marcus activated his comm unit that evening and requested a parley. His message was brief but stunning in its implications. He claimed that he had made first contact with a representative of an advanced alien civilization, that productive negotiations were possible, and that the current military response was jeopardizing what could be the most important diplomatic opportunity in human history. Commander Hayes agreed to the meeting, but with strict conditions. It would take place in an open area with full military support standing by. Any sign of hostility would be met with overwhelming force. The alien would be required to demonstrate its peaceful intentions by submitting to basic containment protocols. Marcus discussed the offer with Zara, and her response revealed how much her thinking had evolved. The old Zara would have seen the proposed meeting as either a trap or an insult to her honor. But the new Zara, influenced by human concepts of diplomatic cooperation, understood that this might be their only chance to resolve the situation peacefully. However, she also understood human psychology better than the military commanders realized. She knew that appearing in any form of restraints would reinforce their perception of her as a dangerous beast to be controlled, rather than an intelligent being to be respected. Instead, she proposed a different approach that would demonstrate her power while also showing her willingness to coexist peacefully. The meeting took place at sunset in the same clearing where Marcus had first found Zara's crashed ship. Commander Hayes arrived with a full security detail, expecting to find a captured alien and a traumatized scientist ready to be debriefed. Instead, he found something that would force him to completely reevaluate humanity's approach to the stars. Zara appeared not as a prisoner or a refugee, but as what she truly was, a warrior and diplomat of an advanced civilization. She had repaired and cleaned her damaged biosuit using materials scavenged from the crash site, and she moved with the confident grace of someone who was negotiating from a position of strength rather than weakness. Most importantly, she appeared alongside Marcus as an equal partner, rather than as either captor or captive. When she spoke, it was in carefully practiced English that Marcus had been teaching her during their time together. Her accent was strange, colored by vocalizations no human could produce, but her meaning was crystal clear. I am Zarathek Kyleth, hunter of the deep stars and daughter of the storm winds. I speak for myself and offer friendship to the children of Earth. Your Dr. Chen has shown me the strength that comes from unity, and I would learn more of your ways. In exchange, I offer knowledge of the galaxy beyond your current reach and alliance with those who hunt between the stars. The words themselves were formal, almost ritualistic, but the implications were staggering. This wasn't just first contact. It was a formal diplomatic overture from an advanced alien civilization, and it had been made possible by one human's simple act of compassion toward a starving stranger. The diplomatic negotiations that followed would later be studied as a masterclass in interspecies relations, but they began with a simple human gesture that nearly derailed everything. When Commander Hayes stepped forward to formally respond to Zara's offer, he extended his hand for a handshake, a gesture so automatic he didn't think about its implications. Zara's response was immediate and telling. Her entire body shifted into a combat stance, claws extending reflexively as her predator instincts interpreted the reaching hand as a potential attack. For a tense moment, the clearing erupted with the sounds of weapons being readied and safeties clicking off. Only Marcus's quick intervention prevented a diplomatic disaster. Commander, among her people extending claws is a sign of respect and strength, Marcus said quickly, improvising based on his growing understanding of Kyleth culture. Zara, he's offering a human greeting of peace and partnership. The moment crystallized everything that would make the negotiations challenging. Both species were operating from completely different cultural frameworks, and gestures that seemed natural to one could be interpreted as threatening by the other. It would take all of Marcus's growing expertise and Zara's hard-won understanding of human nature to bridge the gap. Over the following days, a temporary base was established near the crash site, where formal negotiations could take place. Marcus served as both translator and cultural interpreter, helping each side understand not just the words being spoken, but the intentions behind them. Zara, meanwhile, demonstrated remarkable adaptability, quickly learning to modify her natural behaviors to avoid triggering human defensive responses. The breakthrough came when Zara offered to share the story of her hunt and her people's history with the galaxy. Using a combination of her recovered ship's data systems and Marcus's translation, she painted a picture of a universe far larger and more dangerous than humans had imagined. Her people, the Kyleth, were part of a loose confederation of species known as the Star Hunters, beings who had taken on the role of tracking down and eliminating threats to galactic civilization. The prey she had been hunting when she crashed on Kepler 442b was revealed to be something called a void spawn, a creature of such dangerous intelligence and adaptability that it could consume entire ecosystems if left unchecked. Her failure to complete the hunt meant that somewhere in this sector of space, an existential threat to all life was still active. This revelation changed the entire dynamic of the negotiations. Suddenly, the humans weren't just dealing with first contact. They were potentially facing a crisis that could threaten their very existence. Commander Hayes found himself in the position of needing Zara's expertise far more than she needed human assistance, but Zara's response to this Shift in leverage demonstrated how profoundly her time with Marcus had changed her. Rather than using her advantage to dictate terms, she proposed a partnership that would benefit both species. The Kyleth had the knowledge and experience to deal with galactic threats, but they lacked the human capacity for rapid adaptation and innovative problem-solving. Humans had the creativity and cooperative spirit to find new solutions, but they lacked the experience to survive in a hostile galaxy. Marcus watched with pride as Zara outlined a proposal that was fundamentally human in its approach. She suggested a mutual exchange program where human scientists and diplomats would work alongside Kyleth hunters to learn about galactic civilization, while selected humans would be trained in the advanced combat and survival techniques that had kept the Star Hunters alive for millennia. The negotiations continued for weeks, with representatives from Earth arriving to participate in what was becoming the most important diplomatic process in human history. Marcus found himself in the unique position of being the only human who truly understood Kyleth culture, and the only person Zara completely trusted to accurately represent her people's interests. During this time, Marcus and Zara's partnership deepened into something that transcended professional cooperation. They had been through too much together, learned too much from each other to ever return to their original roles. Marcus was no longer just a human scientist, and Zara was no longer just an alien hunter. They had become something new, a hybrid form of consciousness that combined the best aspects of both species. The formal alliance between Earth and the Kyleth was signed on the anniversary of Marcus and Zara's first meeting. The ceremony took place at the crash site that had become sacred ground for both species, the place where compassion had overcome fear and changed the course of galactic history. But even as they celebrated the success of the negotiations, Marcus and Zara knew that their real work was just beginning. The void spawn that had escaped Zara's hunt was still out there, and intelligence suggested it was adapting to this sector's unique environment faster than anyone had anticipated. Soon they would have to put their new alliance to its first real test. Zara had requested that Marcus accompany her on the hunt, arguing that human creativity and adaptability might be exactly what was needed to succeed where traditional hunting methods had failed. It was a proposal that terrified Earth's leadership but fascinated its scientists. For the first time in human history, one of their own would venture beyond the relatively safe confines of human space into the true depths of the galaxy. As they prepared for departure, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since that day when he had stumbled upon a starving alien in the wreckage of a crashed ship. His simple act of sharing food with a stranger had led to first contact, diplomatic alliance, and now the chance to help protect all of galactic civilization from an ancient evil. Zara, meanwhile, was experiencing her own transformation. She had set out as a lone hunter seeking individual glory and had discovered something far more valuable: the strength that comes from true partnership. Her people's ways had served them well for millennia, but she was beginning to understand that the galaxy was changing in ways that required new approaches and new alliances. The night before their departure, as they sat together watching the stars of Kepler 442b's alien sky, Zara spoke of the future she envisioned. It was a future where the rigid caste systems of the Kyleth gave way to more flexible forms of cooperation, where human creativity could flourish under the protection of Kyleth strength, and where the galaxy's diverse species could work together to face threats that no single civilization could handle alone. It was a remarkably human vision, but one that had been filtered through the wisdom and experience of one of the galaxy's greatest hunters. As they prepared to face the unknown dangers that awaited them among the stars, Marcus and Zara carried with them the hope that their partnership might serve as a model for a new kind of galactic civilization.